Next, I want to talk about some health issues that are related to adolescent development, other than puberty and sexuality. So, during adolescence, nutritional requirements increase. Ever hear moms of teenage boys talk about being eaten out of house and home? The massive growth spurts experienced during adolescence need to be fueled, which ultimately coincides with a time where diets are pretty poor. The early start time of most high schools often results in teens skipping breakfast, eating lots of fast food, and learning the joys of coffee. Teens often have deficiencies in vitamins, particularly iron. And this can be extra problematic as they need lots of iron during their growth spurts, even more so for girls because of the iron and the blood loss associated with menstruation. These deficiencies may get lost in the moody storm of adolescence, but an adolescent who is tired and irritable all the time might actually have anemia. One thing that helps with the nutritional deficits of adolescents is eating together as a family, which is associated with not only better intake of things like fruits, vegetables, grains, and calcium rich foods, but also has positive social benefits like closeness and connectivity. Alas, adolescents are often loath to eat dinner at home with their parents, preferring instead to be out with friends. Additionally, our busy social lives pose a barrier, particularly in families with multiple children who need to be carted to and from various activities at various times. It makes family meals a hassle that parents often avoid. Directly associated with nutrition is eating disorders, a problem that plagues adolescent girls in particular. So, as we discussed when we talked about gender development, girls are inundated early on with unrealistic expectations for beauty and thinness, which all explodes as they hit adolescence. Particular risk factors include entering puberty early, growing up in a home that focuses on weight and thinness, body dissatisfaction, and severe dieting. The three most serious eating disorders that affect adolescent girls are anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa, and binge eating disorder. Anorexia is characterized by starving oneself due to fear of getting fat. We're talking extremely distorted body image, like the images that you see on the screen here. While anorexia primarily affects teenage girls, 10 to 15% of anorexia cases are male, often sexual minority individuals who may struggle with their strong or bulky body. Bulimia is characterized by binge eating, followed by compensatory efforts to avoid weight gain, such as deliberate vomiting or purging with laxatives, or excess exercising and fasting. Again, bulimia primarily impacts girls, although sexual minority boys are vulnerable as well. It's actually more common than anorexia and affects 2 to 4% of teenage girls. Bulimia tends to be easier to treat than anorexia because typically individuals are aware that there's a problem and want help. Binge eating disorder is similar to bulimia in the binge eating component, but this time we don't see the compensatory purging that characterizes bulimia. Binge eating disorder typically leads to overweightness and obesity and is associated with severe distress, suicidal thoughts, and social adjustment difficulties. After sex and pregnancy, the next stop on the adolescent risk train is substance abuse. By the end of high school, 6% of adolescents regularly smoke, 17% report heavy drinking, 21% have used marijuana, another 21% have used highly addictive toxic drugs like amphetamines or cocaine. I want to differentiate between use and abuse. Some adolescents experiment with substances. While we can't specifically condone this behavior as it's illegal, it's ultimately done by adolescents who are psychologically healthy, sociable, and curious. Arguably, just another step along the process of figuring out who they are and who they want to be. But on the other hand, some adolescents abuse substances by taking drugs regularly, requiring increasing amounts to achieve the same effect, escalating to harder substances, and using enough to interfere with their abilities to meet daily responsibilities. We know that substance abusers tend to be impulsive, from low SES backgrounds, have family histories of mental health problems or substance abuse. They are likely to have been abused as a child to show poor school performance and display weak cognitive control. Drug use at least partially reflects some of the sensation seeking behaviors that we see in the teenage years, that quest towards new and exciting things. But some of it is also a result of living in a drug dependent culture. So things like adult caffeine addiction and cigarette smoking are rampant from an early age. We're essentially demonstrating drug use for children. In 1999, Goldstein and colleagues examined all G rated animated films released between 1937 and 1997 by five major production companies: Walt Disney, MGM, Warner Brothers, Universal Studios, and 20th Century Fox. And so what they took all the videos that were available on videotape and coded them for episodes of tobacco and alcohol use. They coded for the presence of substances, the type of substance used, the duration of use, the type of character using the substance, so bad, neutral, or good, and any associated effects. Any idea what percentage of the film displayed at least one episode of tobacco or alcohol use? 68%. So of the 50 films reviewed, 34 displayed at least one episode of tobacco or alcohol use. Another 56% portrayed one or more instances of tobacco use, including all seven films released in 1996 and 1997. 25 films included alcohol use. Smoking was portrayed on screen by 76 unique characters for more than 45 minutes in duration. Alcohol use was portrayed by 63 characters for 27 minutes in duration. Interestingly, good characters were shown to use tobacco and alcohol just as frequently as bad characters. So there was not the predicted difference in terms of character sort of valence. And also interestingly, cigars and wine were showed more often than other tobacco or alcohol substances. Now, only 15 of the 50 movies, that's 30%, showed no tobacco or alcohol instances. And so I've listed the movies here for you. Any similarities or commonalities that you notice? These are the ones that did not show substance use. I'd imagine many of you are not as familiar with children's media as I am. I do love me some animated movies. But one of the biggest commonalities that I noticed is that most of these contain non human characters. The characters are animals, they're toys, they're not human. So it's primarily movies with humans that are engaging in substance use. And what message does that send to kids and adolescents? Goldstein and colleagues found that more than two-thirds of the animated children's films feature tobacco or alcohol use in story plots without any clear verbal messages of the negative long-term health effects associated with use of either substance. So just sort of throwing the wine or the cigarette into the film without really talking about it or having it contribute to the plot much. So it makes you wonder why it needs to be there. So, what can we do to help adolescents, help keep them from abusing substances? Unsurprisingly, the answer is to provide good school and community programs, promote effective parenting, teach skills to resist peer pressure, and reduce social acceptability for drugs. Other strategies include teaching effective coping strategies for coping with stress, academic and vocational training, gradual improvements to boost self efficacy, and family and individual therapy to treat drug abuse. So that's all for this section. Up next, we will end by talking about adolescent cognitive development.